My name is Phil Flora. I'm Vice President Sales and Marketing here at Leopard Solutions. Laura Leopard, CEO and founder, is going to be presenting during the first half of the webinar some great research from the survey we did and from our State of the Industry white paper, which we just released, which had a lot of insights on females in the top 200. So we'll share that during the first half. And then we'll have a great Q&A, which I'm excited to hear from our panelists. I'm going to let them do a brief introduction of themselves. Christy, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Phil, and thank you all for having me. I'm Christy Crider. I am a shareholder at Baker Donelson. We have offices across the Southeast as well as Baltimore, DC. I chair our health law advocacy group. I also chair our women's initiative. I'm in my 10th year of chairing our women's initiative, and I sit on the firm's board of directors. And I'm really excited to learn about this year's research and then have a discussion with the wonderful women that are on this panel about what we do with that information. So thank you for having me. Awesome.
Thanks for being on, Christy. Morgan, would you like to do a little brief intro?
Thank you so much, Christy, and thank you so much, Phil and Laura and Pooja, for having me. It's really an honor. So I am the Director of Talent Acquisition and Professional Development for Herrick Feinstein. Herrick Feinstein is a very long-standing firm. We've been around for about 95 years. We have offices in Newark, New Jersey, New York, New York. We recently opened an office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we have an office in Istanbul, Turkey. But we have a full-service law firm, and real estate is our preeminent practice, but we have a stronghold in all of the areas in which we do business. So it's been lovely and exciting. And I I moved there from Davis Wright Tremaine in May of 22. So it's been a great journey so far, and I've loved every minute of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. And Pooja?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Pooja Krumenacker. I'm the founder and CEO of Balance Legal Solution. I was a former practicing attorney, so I understand some of these challenges that women are facing in law firms. And now I focus on placing lawyers and also coaching lawyers. I have my coaching certification as well. So I hear a lot of these, issues come up in my day-to-day work with these attorneys, and I hope to shed some light today, along with these other wonderful panelists, about how we can get closer to where it's solving this issue.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll be moderating the chat. Again, this is being recorded for those that weren't able to make it, but I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Laura, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. So give me 1 second. Okay. Well, thanks so much for our great panelists joining us to go over what's going on with women in big law today. We began this journey when we saw the end of the year numbers from 2021, and we saw that women who left the top 200 were re-entering that group at a much lower rate than attorneys who were ethnically diverse. There was a difference of, a divide of about 7%. We also had a large number of unknowns. We didn't know where they landed after they left the top 200. So we did a research project to find out where they went. We also decided to survey women who had left big law to ask why. And as we looked at the survey results and the comments that came in, it was really thoroughly depressing. And I knew if we were to share these, we really had to find a balance. So we interviewed women who had succeeded in big law, and we researched article after article on what firms could do to really combat this problem. And we found 11 things that we believe can really make a difference. We also had some real life examples of how they are currently solving these problems with these steps in law firms. Our white paper that will be out in a couple of weeks will have much more information about those real life examples. But today we're just going to be talking about them as we look at the data that came in. So this year, we surveyed women who are currently working in big law to see how their answers were different from those who had left. And of course, we expected to see many more positive comments, and there were many, but there were also many negative comments about their experience in big law. Important to remember that the top 200, big law, is not a monolith. They vary from firm to firm, office to office, practice to practice, and partner to partner. And the comments that we saw in our survey show wide disparities in how women are treated and the opportunities they see before them. So we were asked by a few people who took the survey and who had read that last white paper, why are you just talking about women? Men are leaving big law, true. And that is true. Women are not the only group leaving big law. We see men not returning into big law with a pretty big percentage. And the percentages are not that different. 28% return for non-diverse men and 26% return for non-diverse women. But if we look at the ratio, the difference is enormous. Just 23 women to 77 men returned to big law after leaving a top firm in that group. Yes, men are leaving big law, and some of their reasons, work-life balance, billable hour, there are also reasons women leave big law. But women's struggles are different from men's. They encounter issues, situations, and bias that their male counterparts do not. So we are exploring those issues and why it matters. As it's Women's History Month, I thought we'd just take a look at where we have been. In 1869, Arabella Mansfield became the very first female lawyer in the US when she was admitted to the Iowa bar. That same year, African-American men were given the right to vote. 2 years later, Ada Kepley became the first woman to graduate from law school in the United States, but she was barred from practicing and receiving her degree until 1881. 1872, Charlotte E. Ray became the first African-American female lawyer in the United States. Many years later, 1920, women were finally granted the right to vote. 1924, the first woman hired by a Wall Street law firm, Catherine Nose Lee, was hired by Cadwallader, Wickersham, and Taft. 1944, very first female partner in a Wall Street law firm, Sonia Menskoff. 1956, Alice Bright became Sidley's first woman partner. 2 years later, just for context, Explorer 1 became the very first successfully launched satellite by the US when it was sent into space, 1958. 1963, the Equal Pay Act was passed by Congress. 1970, Noma Stewart becomes the first woman partner at Jones Day. 1971, Christine Bashar becomes Cravat's first female partner. Now let's see where we are in the world today. A survey in Britain says the share of the public who say they are scared to speak out on equal rights of women because of what might happen to them has risen from 14% to 29%. 43% say we have gone too far and we are now discriminating against men. Another survey asked thousands in countries that included the United States, and the results said nearly 52% of Gen Z and 53% of millennials say that society has gone too far in promoting women's rights and that it is discriminating against men. A young woman's death in custody after breaching a dress code sparked protests, which resulted in more deaths. Up to 7,000 schoolgirls were poisoned in Iran, allegedly for just attending school. Here at home, the gender pay gap in the US has stalled. American women typically earn 82 cents for every dollar earned by men. The US ranks 38th in the world on the newly released 2022 SDG Gender Index, which tracks the empowerment of women and girls across a variety of metrics. Wealthier nations tend to rank higher for gender equality, but the US ranks closer to less wealthy nations like South Korea and Costa Rica. Just last Friday, Representative Greg Murphy questioned the United States' top trade negotiator at a House hearing and told her she was too nice to do her job and that she had too nice a smile. Women in leadership roles are leaving, exhausted and torn between their career ambitions and personal lives. They're now bowing out. Women are no longer willing to tolerate companies that don't support them in their roles as mothers. Women in the law experience sexism on the job, in their own office, in their own law firm, but they also experience it in the courtroom. It is not uncommon. I recently presented our Women Leaving Law paper to the San Diego Law Library, where it's offered as a CLE class. And one of the questions that came from an attendee was a young lawyer asking advice on what to do when she experiences sexism in the courtroom. I assumed that she was talking about, her opposing counsel, but she said no, it was the judge in the matter. Approximately 70% of female attorneys surveyed by the Defense Research Institute reported experiencing gender bias in the courtroom. Sexist remarks, sexist taunts, and unfair treatment by the bench all combine for a toxic stew. The Department of Justice found overwhelming evidence of gender bias in the courts. That bias denies women equal justice, equal treatment, and equal opportunity. This is why we are focusing on women and their lack of advancement into partnership in big law. We have found the deck is stacked against them, and we're going to show you how with our data. Who took our survey? Well, over 300 answered the survey, but for the purposes of this research, we really used the answers of about 196 attorneys who had worked in big law. 78% of this group are within the 25 to 35 age group, followed by the 35 to 44 age group with 21%. 73% identified as white or Caucasian. 66% were mid-level associates. 22% were senior associates, and 91% of the respondents were currently working in a top 200 law firm. Which of the following best describes your career goals upon entering a top 200 law firm? Make partner, number one response. Did your goals change after joining a top 200 firm? 40% said yes. Many did not see a path to partnership. Motherhood was a big reason that partnership did not look attractive. Work-life balance, looking at unreasonable hours were all part of that equation. Here, for the women who said, no, my goals did not change, you really see a completely different world. They mention flexibility, given them that they don't want to lose, so they're going to stay put at their firm. They see a path to partnership that is streamlined and defined. They feel their goal is attainable, and they like the work more than they expected. Their answers are a mirror reality to the women on the other side of the question. If you're currently not a partner, do you see a path to partnership? No one has discussed my career development with me. There is no clear path or mentorship, especially for a working mother. There is a lack of transparency, a lack of mentorship, too demanding with little flexibility for working moms. I see the path. I'm not sure I'm willing to take the path. And that is why we say mentorship is one of our action items And a solid mentorship program can really make a huge difference. You're going to see mentorship appear in so many answers in this survey. A really solid mentorship program can make all the difference for women, can make all the difference for any associate coming up in big law. Now, for those who answered yes, our path to partnership is clear. They have a good pipeline program. I see other people become partner. I can become partner too. My firm has done an incredible job cultivating women. I see other people supported. Again, we're looking at that mirror reality. When I said the top 200 is not a monolith, it's absolutely true. And you can see the stark differences between their different answers here. Have you encountered gender bias at your top 200 firm? It changed my career goals and the way I work. It is a difficult and intangible experience, but it is ever present. Inability to juggle work as a working mother of 2 young children. Microaggressions affects morale and satisfaction with work. The stress of dealing with gender bias, coupled with the fact that my work would be found wanting regardless of its quality, negatively affected my work. And that's why one of our items is uncover unconscious bias. Equality will never be a reality unless leadership recognizes that it is not currently equal. Men are promoted at a higher rate. Male laterals are hired at a larger rate, and males dominate the partner ranks in big law. These are some additional responses to the bias question, and some of them clearly highlight that they are not receiving the same opportunities as their male peers. And that's one of our items. Give women opportunities. How do you succeed at a law firm? You stack up those billable hours, you bring in business. If women do not receive the same amount of opportunities as offered to their male colleagues, how can they possibly win that competition? Now, these were the more positive comments, but I do find it hard to believe that 51% of the women who answered our survey have not encountered gender bias. I think it's more likely that they did, but they have found coping mechanisms that really work for them. Every woman on this planet has coping mechanisms, and they have a plan to deal with bias when they see it. I mean, look at this answer. Have you encountered gender bias? Not much. It's just annoying, but I move past it. So these were the positive answers for this question, but they also have some lingering doubt, right? Like at the top there, you don't see it in your practice area, but you have seen it in others. You are armed with HR experience. You're not afraid to speak up, but you have had the experience in your firm. You're just happy that it hasn't been repeated. You have been given the opportunity to speak to women clients, but does that make it equal? Or are you just given the women clients to work with? How about you work hard to find people who do not enforce gender bias? You recognize you don't get the socialization that your male peers do. And while no one has performed a glaringly obvious sexist act, you suspect you're being underpaid. Some of those reasons also outlined how difficult it is for women to be heard and to speak with clients and colleagues in a professional manner without being dismissed or talked over. And that's why one of our items is let women speak. Women have had men talk over them in meetings. They've had them repeat what they just said to claim an idea for their own. These are daily microaggressions that really should be addressed by the people in the room when it happens. This behavior undermines confidence and leads to women being less vocal. We asked for any additional thoughts that they would like to share. And along with the need for mentorship, you see one thing come up over and over and over and over again, and that is motherhood, and that is planning for a family or dealing with the family you already have. And that's why one of our action items is offer equal paternity care. It's really a no-brainer. It's the easiest thing for the firm to do. And by offering equal paternity care, you have men and women taking off time to care for a new child. It puts less of a stigma on women when they take that time off. So here's looking at, what is important to you. And if we just look at number 5, that blue on the end there, the most important thing, remote work came in with the most. Flex time was second, mentorship was third. But if we combine number 4 and 5, more important and most important, what we see is that mentorship is number 1. Mentorship takes first place, followed by remote work and flex time. They're just asking for help. They're asking for help. A mentorship program not only benefits women, it benefits everyone else at the firm. Work-life balance is far and away the biggest issue that frustrates our survey group. When we ask them about, work at their firm, this is what they said. 33% said that they totally agreed that they received formal firm-assigned mentorship. The next category was, I mostly agree, at 31%. It's kind of interesting, though, that they answered that way, right? I mean, either they did or they didn't have mentorship. The most agree might mean that while they were assigned a mentor, it wasn't as helpful as they'd hoped. 33% said partners at their firm valued their work. 45% said they mostly agreed to that statement. The firm assignment question was a bit less certain. Only 18% said that they totally agreed that it was fair. The largest percentage mostly agreed, so it wasn't a wholehearted yes from that group. Only 26% totally agreed that everyone is given proper attribution, irrespective of gender or ethnicity. 28% mostly agreed. This is why our action item is important. Acknowledge women's success and give them credit where credit is due. If you left your current position, what opportunity would interest you? Work in-house was the largest response. How open are you to new opportunities? There was a large number that said that they weren't interested, about 49%. There was a group, 40%, open to opportunities, and 10% were actively seeking new roles. Are you satisfied in your job? The largest number, close to 50%, said they were somewhat satisfied. About 12% were very satisfied. For the new job opportunity, what's the most compelling reason for you want to move? Work-life balance. That's really one of our action items too. It's that offer a flex time schedule, remote work. Flex time could really help women work on that work-life balance far more easily. Offering childcare at work, giving time off, to deal with a sick relative. These are perks that both men and women can use, and flex time could allow you to keep valuable employees you might otherwise lose. Now, if you had a daughter, would you recommend big law to her as a career, or law to her as a career? For the women who said no, the answers are reflective of what they see and feel. And the one that resonates the most is the top one. My mom practiced as a lawyer in the 80s and left because she had kids and didn't feel that she could balance the two. I've told her some of the sexism I've experienced in the workplace, and she couldn't believe that the same things were still happening to me that happened to her some 40 years ago. I mean, that really says it all. Tolerating sexism is a choice. You either do it or you don't. If it's important to you to create a safe culture that women can thrive in, you can. It starts with just choosing to do so. Now, the yes responses still had some caveats, like I would guide her somewhere other than big law, right? Until there were changes in the industry, or maybe it would be better once she got there. Yes, if she was interested in it, I would encourage her. A lot of careers involve long hours. But in the long term, it is quite exhausting. So I would encourage her to try different things and to think about what kind of life she wants to create, more than just solely focus on career goals. Now let's look at our Leopard Solutions data. Promotions to partner still lag for women, even though they've made more progress than other underrepresented groups. There are a number of roadblocks for women that just don't exist for their male counterparts. Women are being encouraged early in their career, and firms are hiring more women than men from law school, but women say support is lacking for them at the mid-career level. Having women in leadership is important not only for role models and for the up-and-coming associates, but for firm management as well. How can men write rules for women without understanding what they need? They can't, and they shouldn't, and it's one of our action items. Give women a seat at the table. Did you know that 17% of the managing and co-managing partners of the top 200 are women? They are. And that's pretty impressive considering that women represent just 27% of partnership. If we look at the beige and blue bars that represent entry-level hiring, you will see a pattern growing. In 2019, men and women were even, but women start to outpace men in the entry-level hiring in 2020, and that trend continues over the next few years. Men consistently outpace women on lateral hiring, but the gap lessened a bit in 2022. Now, this chart looked remarkably similar until we reached 2022. The number of younger women has jumped considerably about going back into a top 200 firm, while the rest remain pretty much the same. Here, we look at female exits by age group. So looking at women in all age groups, we see that the largest group moving back into a top 200 firm is the youngest age group, and that hits 31%. That 31% drops to just 25% in the 31 to 35 age group and remains in that general area until it drops to just 21% in the oldest age group that's moving. The 41 to 45 group has the largest group moving into a non-Am Law firm at 19%, and the corporate world took 31% of women attorneys in the 25 to 30 age group and 29% in the 36 to 40 mid-career group. Now here, we are looking at white male exits from the top 200, and we see the completely opposite story. The largest group to exit and re-enter the top 200 is the 41 to 45 age group, with 38% returning. It's a strong 33% in the 36 to 40 age group. And note that they return to a top 200 firm more often than any other job option. They are being recruited, and they're staying in big law more often in late to mid-career. In 2012, it took 40% more in the days, after they were hired to make a partner as an entry-level associate versus a lateral hire. So as you can see here, not an enormous amount of difference, of 40% difference. Today, laterals make partner after an average of 1,622 days. Entry-level hires face 3,229 days before they would be promoted to partner, right? So 2012, that was 965 days. 965 days. And now that number has grown tremendously. Here are promotion to partner stats. And as you can see, in 2012, they promoted many more entry-level hires to partner than laterals, a big 133% more. So back in 2012, entry-level hires were being promoted to partner far more often than lateral hires were. Now, if we look at today, completely flipped. 46% fewer promotion for entry-level hires. All of that began to change right around here. So here's my entry levels in this light blue, and here's my laterals. Over time, laterals have really gained in the promotion to partner area. And there's something else that we have to look at here, and that is hiring. So in 2012, these firms hired a good deal more entry-level hires than laterals. Over time, that pattern began to change. And in 2022, you see laterals outpacing entry-level hires by a really good margin. Only 55 firms in this group hire more entry-level associates than lateral associates. The hiring pattern has completely flipped from what it was in 2012. Lateral hires topped entry-level hires in 2018, and it has remained the same ever since. So let me remind you, these firms hire more male laterals than females by a very good margin. They are hiring more women entry-level attorneys, but entry levels are being promoted less, and the road to partnership is far longer. Now, these are laterals by JD year and divided by gender. So just looking from afar, you can see there are many more laterals, of course, on the younger side than the older side. That's typical. Looking more closely, you can see that women are making a strong showing in the age groups all the way up until 2018. They're making a, pretty even lateral wise. Then it totally changes, and men beat them JD year, each grouping by each grouping, consistently over time. And they just continue to dominate the lateral market. Even in the older laterals, you see, and this would be looking at partner laterals. You're looking at older laterals, you see that the men outpace women by a really good margin in many groups. So what we said before was hire more women laterals. And now we say hire more senior women laterals and get them a little bit closer to that partnership ring. And I have to say, women should remember that not all firms are created equal. And while some firms don't support women, as we've seen in our survey, others do, and choices are out there. So looking at the promotion numbers, it's great to see them go up in 2022, but let's look at the percentages. So women went up 1% in partnership numbers, but the gap remains wide. Let's remember, there is parity on the associate level. This is the level that really needs adjustment. Looking at older laterals, you see that men outpace women by a good margin in many groups. Promotion fairness, this is one of our action items. It has been found by McKinsey and Company that when considering promotions, men are evaluated based on potential, while women are evaluated based on performance. And these unequal standards lead to the extremely skewed management structure that you can see in most workplaces. So the number one thing that companies can do to advance gender equality is to change the way they evaluate women for promotions, ensuring that they are on the same level playing field. From what we can see so far, that playing field is not level. These are the ways that we talked about. They will be expanded in the white paper that's going to be coming in a couple of weeks. You're going to see real life examples of what firms are currently doing to improve gender equality in their firms. So please take that white paper and take some of these action items and put them into play. This is the one thing I really want everybody to take away with them today. This shouldn't be happening 40 years later. And here's why it's important. So this is we're looking at exits by gender based on overall distribution. Women represent 39% of associates, partners, and counsels in the top 200. But if we look at everyone who exited since 2021, we see that women are leaving the top 200 at a disproportionately higher rate than men. This is why it matters. It's not pie. Remember those surveys we saw earlier? Equal rights for others does not mean less rights for you. Equality is vital in any society or any industry or any business. When there's inequality, progress as a whole becomes more difficult. When everyone is considered to be equal and treated the same way, people have the freedom to associate more freely with others, share their knowledge, and it has a more positive impact. And to that end, recognizing that law firms that have a higher percentage of women partners, they do very well in our index. We've determined that equality at the top has really contributed to that success. So we are going to be adding in the percentage of women partners into our law firm index in about a week. And we look forward to showing you those results. There will be some shuffling among that top 250. And if you have our BI suite, this information is also going to be in our index report, where you can benchmark your firm against any of your competitors' numbers on all of these factors, including partner gender diversity. Thanks, everybody. I think I ran a little long, but
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Laura. That was great. A lot of good information there. And now I'd like to hear from the group here, get some initial thoughts. Christy, you want to kick it off?
Yes, thank you, Phil. And wow, Laura, there was so much to absorb in that. And thank you so much for taking the lead on getting that incredibly helpful information back to us. The first thing about the information that struck me was Ada Kepley. And Laura, I didn't know about Ada Kepley, and now I want to study Ada Kepley, because might we all be Ada Kepleys? If my math is right, 11 years passed from the time that she graduated from law school to the time she was barred. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from that, which is that change is incremental and it requires patience and diligence. And so that was my first takeaway, is to learn all about Ada Kepley and how she stayed the course for those 11 years when things probably felt a little discouraging and bleak. So thank you for sharing about her. Second, I think there's some really useful information in the two things that those that were surveyed found most important. And I looked at the makeup of those who responded to the survey, and it's overwhelmingly associates. And I think that the mentorship and flexibility are two things that we have just got to address head on. And at Baker Donelson, our women's initiative is made up of a number of subcommittees of things that we have determined are critical to the advancement of women by listening and asking what they need. One of our subcommittees is mentoring, and one of them is alternative work arrangements and flexibility. And we can maybe talk a little bit more in detail about those two things later. But I think a big part of getting where we want to be is listening to what the needs are, gathering information like what you just gathered, Laura, but also asking these hard questions internally at the places where each of us work, to find out exactly what it is that our women need. And then the last thing I would say is I'm really interested to learn more about the information at the end of the presentation on laterals, because I think one view of that is that all laterals came from somewhere else. So if you're getting them, they're leaving somewhere, right? These are not new people entering the workforce. And so what that stat tells me is perhaps women are sticking longer. There's so much lateral growth with men in what you just showed, and yet we weren't seeing those same sorts of lateral numbers for women. And is that because women are seeing that the grass is not always greener and they want to stick and they want to build? I think I mentioned this last year. It just came back to me. My mom was a 7th grade science teacher, and she had a poster in her room that said, "Grow where you are planted." And that has stuck with me all these years, because these things that you have pointed out that plague the legal industry, we are not the only industry that is plagued by sexism. You go to accounting firms, you go to the film industry, you see it's everywhere. And so I think the question is not whether there are going to be instances that exist where each of us find ourselves building our careers. It's how are we going to address it? And how are we going to improve it? So I thought that lateral data was really interesting, that women tend to be, based on that stat, if I'm interpreting it correctly, a little less mobile. And does that mean they're sticking a little longer? Just food for thought.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they are leaving big law in disproportionate numbers means to me that they're not lateraling to another top 200 firm. They're choosing somewhere to go outside of that, whether it's an
Excellent point.
law firm. Yeah. That's the only.
That's an excellent point. And I will say, I have a lot of close friends and clients who are in-house practitioners who are women. And once they get there, they say, I don't know why I thought this was going to offer me more balance, because I am working equally hard as I was when I was at a firm. So I do think there's something to be studied there as well.
Yeah.
Morgan, any initial thoughts?
I think one of my favorite things about these findings is, one, how detailed it was, but two, how it debunked the common theories that women were leaving law during this period because of either COVID or because of child rearing. It has a lot more to do with the fact that women feel like they don't have a path forward at some of these law firms, or they don't feel heard, or they don't feel like they're given the opportunity to construct a path forward in the same way that their other counterparts do. And so this gives firms and other entities an opportunity to take a look at themselves and say, what are we doing really well here to promote representation and to promote female leadership? But two, like, what can be improved? And I think, adopting that spirit of continuous improvement is what's needed, because we don't want to have to wait 11 years in order for change to be made. It's certainly not at this point. So the quicker we can expedite these changes for women, I think the better off we are. And data like this my hope is that it will be a catalyst, and conversations like these are certainly catalysts.
Awesome. Pooja?
Yeah, one thing that struck me with all this data is that, especially in the comments that I was reading when I was looking at it originally, was these women are falling victim to what I call a single story. And I see it time and time again in my coaching and recruiting practice, where, like Christy said, firms are not really listening to what these women want. And to take it one step further, they're not really asking the right questions to determine what women want. So the single story I see time and time again in my practice is assuming that it's one-dimensional based on a gender or race in terms of what everybody wants. I experienced it when I was younger. The stories you see in school about India, it's like poor caste system, you have arranged marriages, right? And that's the single story, and they don't say anything else about any other aspect of it. When I was reading these comments, a lot of these employers assume because it's a woman, she's good at admin tasks, or she wants those admin tasks that she's been tasked with. Or two, that she does not want to be involved in some of these networking events that they might involve the male counterparts in, such as the golfing events or the sporting events, where it's a chance to go meet clients and network with people at the firm. So I think it was kind of eye-opening to me that, oh my goodness, yes, this is happening. And I see it in my own life. People assume I can't golf because I'm a woman, but then ask my husband to go golfing. And I'm like, I'm a better golfer than my husband, but you don't even know because you didn't ask, right? So I think it's the question of saying, you're just assuming all women want to mentor another women mentor because she's a woman, versus, like Christy said, figuring out what it is that person wants in their goals and then matching up with the proper mentor, regardless of gender or race or ethnicity, but based on sort of what they want to achieve in their careers.
Awesome. Pooja, I want to follow up. There was a question that just came in. I don't know if you get to see it or not. It's so the question was around women of color finding additional obstacles and so on. How is that being tackled in your opinion in some of the laterals that you work with, or any examples that you might have and the conversations you've had with some of your clients?
Well, some of the candidates that I work with I tend to work with a lot of women and women of color in my practice, where I do tend to in my coaching and recruiting practice. And one of a firm whose done it correctly in terms of promoting and making sure they're being transparent is a candidate I work with, where she was in a practice area that was not flourishing. So she had a frank conversation. We had a conversation about how she should approach her partners and say, am I going to make partner working in this practice area? And we kind of delved into what she wanted and how she was going to ask those questions. And she asked those questions, and they said, based on the numbers and how this practice group is performing, no, it's not likely that you are going to make partner in this practice area. So they did an amazing thing where they took her, retrained her, and made sure she was on the same career path to become partner in a different practice area. And Morgan, you and I have actually worked on this candidate before with Davis, right? And she's a superstar now in terms of what she's achieved and where she's come, even though she started late and she's a woman of color, but they were able to take her, train her. And because of the communication back and forth between them, and not assuming that she wanted one thing because of her gender or race, we're able to put her in a place of success. And it really worked well. And I feel like a lot of it was because of the communication and the honesty and directness between the two parties.
That's awesome. Morgan, do you want to add on any initiatives or examples that you've seen in in your current firm or your previous firm where some intake of laterals or internal folks you guys were able to promote?
Yeah, I'll do a little of both. I mean, I think that first and foremost, our firm has Herrick Feinstein has a ton of female leadership in place, which is just terrific to see. And as I was interviewing, both at Davis Wright Tremaine, my prior firm, and at Herrick, I really wanted to make sure that was something that I could see, because I can't sell a product unless I believe in it. So that's first and foremost. But I think, currently at Herrick, we are putting a fresh coat of paint on our Women's Initiative Network, which is WIN internally, and that has components of mentorship within. And I think that's a really great way to put our attorneys in front of partners that have flourished and that have built books of business. And that leads to them participating in client development pitches. And that's another wonderful way that we do that. But our firm also supports outside of the box thinking in terms of, other women's initiatives that we have that are specific, for example, to, diverse female lawyers. So, for example, Shivani Podar spearheads the Ladies in Law Initiative, which she essentially established to make sure that diverse female lawyers were advancing and to serve as a platform for women in the legal field to create organic relationships that would lead to business development. And so I think those are just two amazing examples of how much our firm invests in these sorts of things. And it definitely pays dividends because we see, female leadership within all corners of the firm. And I think that, Davis Wright Tremaine was also an excellent platform. So Lynn Loecker spearheaded Project W, which was really wonderful. And it was intended to help women business leaders flourish. And there would be really industry-specific panels that focused on, for example, financial services or tech, that gave people an opportunity for both the lawyers and the business owners at all stages of their business to talk about the things that were most common among their industries and form bonds that would hopefully lead to business development. Because I think in a lot of ways, it's the lack of opportunities for business development that lead to women sort of falling behind. And you have to create those opportunities and really push those opportunities. Pooja may agree with me with regard to this statement, but I also think sometimes women, when they're lateraling, and I saw this on the agency side myself when I was at Major Lindsay in Africa, women have a tendency to downplay their books of business or downplay their relationships. And I think that it's important to have coaches like Pooja who are championing for them and saying, you know, you don't have to make it a 100%, but go ahead and leverage your skill set here, or go ahead and leverage this relationship here, and inspire them to really promote themselves in the way that their other counterparts may be doing that's led to their success. So it's just sort of leveling the playing field in any way that you can. And I think that the initiatives that I see internally at my current firm cover those bases and achieve those objectives, as well as my prior firm. And then I wouldn't be able to do it without recruiters like Pooja that help me stay informed in the market and help me keep appraised of how candidates feel. So yeah, I think that sums it up for me.
Awesome. Good stuff, Morgan. And Christy, I think you started talking a little bit about some of the stuff that you guys are doing, and I would love to hear it again, if you don't mind, and expand on anything you got or anything new that you have to want to mention.
Sure. Thank you, Phil. Well, I want to dovetail off of something that Morgan said, which is about women's books of business, because there is one truth that is universal. It doesn't matter what firm you're in. If you have a book of business, you have control, you have a voice. A book of business is something that is going to give you the ability to make decisions for yourself and not have other people making decisions for you about the trajectory of your career. And so we spend a lot of time at Baker Donelson through our women's initiative on helping women build their books of business. And a groundbreaking program that we put in place, I think we're in our 6th year, is called our Women to Equity program. And we take applications from women income shareholders. We have about 12 women, sometimes 14 in the program at a time. And each woman is paired with a fellow income shareholder who's in the program, and then each has a female equity shareholder mentor. And the 3 of them work as a unit together. We have programming every other month. And then on the off months, those 3 women get together to talk about what they learned in the last program, how they are going to apply it to their business plans go forward. And our graduation rate, you stay in the program until you graduate. This is not a 1-year program. We keep you until you are equity. And when you make equity, we all get together, we have a champagne toast, we see you off on your way, and then we watch you climb the equity ranks and we celebrate you. We have a fantastic percentage of women graduating from that class. All they need is to get wrapped up in some additional resources. All they need is a collaboration partner and a mentor. We're really proud of that. For some of our younger women who are still on the track to make income, we have implemented 2 years ago a Women to Income series that all are welcome to attend, where we go over some of the key steps to helping these people on the track to income begin to build their books. And then also we have a business development grants program that I run through our women's initiative, that if any woman in the firm wants to have face-to-face time with a client, and she perhaps does not have money left in her business development budget to get there, she applies for a grant. It's a pretty simple 1-page application about why she wants to go, who she wants to see, and what she wants to accomplish. And then I give her a grant to go see that person and that client or potential client in person. And we have some great success stories that have come from that. I could talk all day. I don't want to dominate all the time, but I will sum it up by saying, if your program does not have a heavy emphasis on helping women build their books in a very personal way, I think you're missing a big opportunity.
Awesome. Awesome. And that kind of goes, we had a question come in earlier, and when Laura was speaking about work-life balance being quote unquote sort of a catchphrase, right? It's the response that comes not only from a lot of the surveys on women, but, you know, as Laura mentioned, on men as well. And obviously there's a bottom line aspect to the business. Does anyone want to speak to sort of that balance of what that looks like? Feel free to jump in. I'm just throwing it out to the group.
I'm happy to. So, I mean, I think, Herrick Feinstein is based off of an 1,800-hour billable model, and innately that's lower than the industry standard of about 2,000. But I think that real balance means being able to communicate boundaries with your colleagues and find creative ways to prioritize and feel comfortable prioritizing things when something in your life emerges that might be impacting the way that you typically work. And so there might be instances where you're pulling all-nighters. Of course, it's the practice of law, but I also think that people need time to recharge and to find ways to, bolster the firm that they're working in and be an asset to the communities that they're working in. And so DEI initiatives are incredibly important. Taking part in pro bono is incredibly important, and diversifying your work so that when you come back to your substantive expertise, you feel refreshed and you feel excited and rejuvenated. And I think that those are all really important points. But I think that, the work-life balance aspect, it's a delicate dance, but I think the way that you achieve it is in an environment that breeds that candor and that gives you the opportunity to really speak out and explain, what you need for yourself, because the practice of law is certainly a marathon and not a sprint. So however we can do things to sort of promote that longevity, we are all ears, but we're also trying to cultivate that environment so that, women and underrepresented groups are not charged with having to have those conversations. We want to be proactive. We want to be thoughtful about it. And so we want to encourage those conversations, but it shouldn't be on the burden of women, again, and underrepresented groups to continuously bring that up. We should be able to see around corners, especially with all of this incredible data.
I'll add, I agree with everything Morgan said, and she said it so eloquently. A couple of things. First, the path to equity ownership at any big law is hard work. It's hard work. And I mean, my mom, as I said earlier, was a 7th grade science teacher, and she graded papers at night. My dad was a policeman, and he got called out at 7 at night if there was a horrible, accident or something. Hard work, success in any profession comes with really hard work. And there are very valuable members of law firms who don't want to put in 2,500 hours a year, which I think, 2,300 is probably a realistic investment if you're combining all of the time that you give, not just your billable hours, but what you give to pro bono, what you give to marketing, what you give to mentoring other lawyers, all those things. And that is not right for everyone, and that's okay. And I think law firms have got to either recognize that and create alternate paths that feel good and successful and right. As Morgan said earlier, asking the right questions about what people need. Second, after we embrace the path to equity, shareholder is a really hard work, is that I often tell the people I mentor that billable hours are what you invest in the law firm, and your marketing time is what you're investing in yourself. And so there is a balance there. And you can often, as an associate, regardless of what firm you're in, perhaps make more money in a year because of the way comp structures are set up if you forego the marketing time and business development time and really just invest all of your time in billable hours. You might get that quick dopamine hit at the end of the year of a little extra bonus. But if you're thinking long-term, that balance between the two is so important about thinking about the long-range path of your career rather than just the way to make the most money you can possibly make this year. And I think that is, when I see an associate that sees that balance and sees the importance of the long-term investment in relationships over the billable hour, that's generally a person that I think is going to be very successful long-term.
I love it. That makes perfect sense. And maybe, it contributes to the rise, and when a lot of folks putting in those hours and that time, and the rise in, again, men and women leaving at a certain point, right? And the JD years that Laura was talking about. What do you think, Laura, on that?
I do. I think it's really, it's an excellent point, because what Christy is talking about is career strategy. It's career strategy. And I think, and we have seen examples, and we have talked to people who have suddenly been tapped on the shoulder and become awake to the prospect that they're supposed to be building business. They don't know it. They're just working so hard on that hamster wheel that they really haven't thought outside of what's right in front of them. Those are the people that have a long-term strategy, whether that's to be partner in this law firm, or they're spending time getting to know outside clients so they can make that move, into in-house. There was a significant amount of women that said, number one was to make partner at their law firm. Number two was to get experience and then go in-house. And that too requires strategy, right? Because they have to get to know more people outside of their normal world. So I think what it says to everyone, anyone that's looking at a career other than a job, is you need a strategy, and you need to start on that strategy early. And you might need help formulating that strategy and refining that strategy. And that's where, someone like Pooja or, mentorship at a firm would really come in handy.
All right, we're past 2. We could keep going. I think this has been great, but I think we can maybe start wrapping up. Pooja, do you want to kick things off, sort of on any thoughts anywhere else that haven't really been touched yet, and then we'll kind of go around the room.
Sure. One thing I did notice is, all these words like work-life balance, mentoring, they all mean so many different things to different people. So I think one takeaway that I had from this is I'm going to delve a little bit more with my clients and candidates to figure out what that means to them. So if someone comes to me and says, I want to move, or I'm trying to achieve work-life balance, the one question I'm going to ask, and I've been asking now more and more, is what does that mean to you? Because for some people, it may mean working 1,800 hours. Some don't mind working 2,300 hours, like Christy said, but it may mean doing it from the hours of 10 to 9 versus 7 to 5, and being accessible only at that time, or working remotely 1 day a week, whatever it is. They have their sort of vision in terms of how they want to accomplish their goal. And I feel like it's my responsibility, knowing this, to kind of delve into it in more detail, to solidify it, like Laura said, so we can strategize in terms of how they can reach that. If they want to say work-life balance, that's a very big term. Mentoring, very big term, but get more detailed, get more concrete in what they mean by those terms. So I had a candidate, great example, AmLaw 100 firm. She was a single parent because her partner was out in the foreign service at that time. She asked her firm if she could work remotely, because of the fact she needs to be home with her kids, still working 2,300 hours. Her firm said, no, you have to be in the office 3-4 days a week because that's our structure. Long story short, she moved to a firm that supported her, not necessarily to work less, but supported her in her endeavor to still be successful, but also be there for her family. So I think we have to delve into each story a little bit more about what these terms mean to each individual in order to help them strategize.
Awesome. Morgan, and I failed to mention the recent news that your firm just had. So maybe you want to add that as part of your closing notes.
Absolutely. So Belinda Schwartz was named executive chair of our firm. And I was there when it was announced in front of the partners, and the excitement across the room was very palpable. I mean, it was just pure joy. And it was a really great moment to see in our eyes. There's no one more deserving of it. Not just because, this is a female leader and we're trailblazing in a way, because she now comprises like 10% of women that are leading major law firms, but because Belinda is an incredibly strategic, thoughtful, compassionate leader that we're confident will account for the betterment of the firm as a whole. And she will continue to lead the real estate practice. I'd also like to mention, that our second largest practice at the firm is our litigation department, led by Carol Goodman. And last year we welcomed a female-dominated private clients practice from Kelly Dry, led by Carolyn Caulfield and Christy Mason. And so I could go on and on and on and talk about how many examples of representation there are at the firm. But I think that representation begets representation. And I think it's always good to remind your workforce that there are not finite amounts of seats at the table, and that we all benefit from diversity, inclusion, representation. And that accounts for diversity in all its forms, not just gender diversity. So we're looking for new and innovative ways to sort of capitalize on that. And I just really appreciate the time. I'm so thankful for the conversation. And yeah, I look forward to the podcast, I believe, that's following.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to stay on for a little bit afterwards. Christy, you had a great little analogy you mentioned before we went live. You want to talk a little bit about that and any closing other comments you have?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my audio and video feed. I paused. Can you hear me now okay?
Yeah, we're good. You're good.
All right. Yeah, in closing, I would just say, first of all, that I think now more than ever, women are looking for purpose and satisfaction in their careers, not just to get to a brass ring that someone has told them should be important to them. And so for law firms, I think the question to ask is, what is important to each woman and how can you offer that to her so that her path is meaningful and satisfying to her? And for the women on this call who are not yet in positions of leadership, to be asking that question of yourself. You know, what is it that you need in order to find a fulfilling path? And then second, I would say, I feel like I'm breaking up again. Second, I would say, have a written plan. You guys talked about a career strategy. I mean, those were excellently chosen words, because every woman that I mentor, every person that I mentor, I have them commit their plan to writing. And then it's so much easier to get feedback. It's so much easier to review it from time to time and ask yourself big picture questions about whether you are heading in the direction that you want to be heading, rather than being nudged in a direction that may not be the direction that's right for you. So have a written plan and be a good mentee. The best mentees that I mentor are the ones that show up to our meetings, having given me a written plan ahead of time for review to give them feedback on, and having a very specific set of questions for me that they want feedback on, rather than just a check-in, how you doing today. Those tend to be much less productive. And then finally, I would say, and I'll end on this note, that the proof is in the pudding at your law firm. And look at what are the percentage of women in leadership. At Baker Donelson, 50% of our department heads are women. Our COO's a woman. And going back to the Ada Kepley example, we also know that change is incremental. So if you're not seeing the percentage of equity partners that are women that you want, take a look at, say, the last 4 classes that have made equity. Were those more like 50% women? If they were, great, your firm's heading in the right direction. If they're not, might be time to start asking questions as to why. What is the why behind that? So, I mean, the fact that you've shown up and invested over an hour of your day in learning and trying to see the big picture tells me that the women on this call are already big term strategy thinkers anyway. That's why you're here today. So those are my final 3 pieces of advice.
Awesome. All right, great stuff. Laura, anything you want to add to wrap this up?
Well, just to sort of echo what Christy just said, not all of these law firms are the same. And that's important to remember. There was a question that came in about what's the difference between mentors and champions. And I think at some point, the word mentorship can get a little overused and underutilized. Firms like Christie's really are champions. They're taking them by the hand and helping them take the steps that they need to do to get to that equity partnership. And I'm sure Herrick has some of the same great programs for women. Those are the firms that can really help effectively mentor you to partner. Not all mentorships are not the same that, all firms are not the same. And while COVID and childbirth is not why, there was no major exodus of women during COVID, thanks to, child rearing and things. Childbirth and childcare are still top of mind for women attorneys. Can they have a family and be a partner? Can they have a personal life, basically, and be a partner? Firms that help answer that question to the degree that women are comfortable with it are the firms that are really going to succeed in building a strong female presence and partnership. And that's something all firms are going to have to come to terms with, because eventually we're going to take over the world. We're already leading, right, on all those entry-level hires. Eventually, we're just going to be more in the pool than you find men. So solving these problems now are going to help you in the future.